Next week on Coronation Street, Bethany pushes Daniel away as she returns to the UK, Carla and Lisa share a moment, Kit makes a disturbing discovery, and Jesse Chadwick is back, but who is he here to see? Bethany is finally able to return back to the UK from Turkey next week, though not without a huge sacrifice from her family. Bethany has been stuck in an Istanbul hospital for the past couple of weeks after a liposuction procedure went wrong, leaving her battling sepsis and with a stoma bag for life. With Bethany not having declared the procedure on her travel insurance, it's been down to the Platts to try and desperately raise the funds to cover both her hospital bill, which is increasing by thousands per day, and the costs of flying Bethany home. Although the CEO of the clinic met with Sarah and offered to pay any accommodation costs, she stopped short of offering any further assistance, pointing out the consent form that Bethany had signed waiving such responsibility. As a result, grandmother Gail has taken the decision to place number 8, the family home, on the market. Next week, David is forced to break the news to wife Shona that Gail is now committed to selling their house, having now been approved for a bridging loan to pay the cost of Bethany's medevac flight. Meanwhile, Bethany's boyfriend Daniel is worried that he may have inadvertently been the cause of Bethany opting to get liposuction in the first place. Daniel had been seen by Bethany hugging his ex, Daisy, shortly before she departed. He had been the first to travel to Turkey to be by Bethany's side, after Sarah's trip was delayed due to an expired passport, but when Sarah arrived she placed all the blame on Daniel and ordered him to leave. As everyone prepares for Bethany's return, Daniel explains to Ken his concern that he had caused Bethany to become insecure about her body image, worried about the future of their relationship. Daniel heads to Weatherfield General as Bethany is finally brought home, but he's faced with an angry Sarah who again makes it clear that he is not welcome there. Meanwhile, Sarah's ex-husband Adam decides to finally come clean about the big secret he's been keeping from her, the fact that Sarah's ex-boyfriend Damon, who is currently in prison, had left her a message offering to cover all of Bethany's medical fees. Adam had picked up the message when checking Sarah's voicemails at her request, but had used his solicitor head and opted to delete it, rather than pass it on and risk Sarah being tempted to take the dodgy cash. But with his conscience pricking away at him, Adam heads to the factory and tells a stunned Sarah the truth. As Sarah decides to call Damon, will she be tempted to use the money to repay Gail? When Daniel finally gets to talk properly with Bethany, it seems that her body image issues have only worsened, as she tells him that her life has now changed and he would be better off going back to Daisy. Will Daniel be able to convince Bethany that she's the one he wants to be with? Meanwhile, the age-old rivalry between the houses of Platt and Grimshaw is set to be reignited again, as a surprise visitor arrives on the cobbles. Having now returned from her trip to Thailand to see son Jason following his latest accident, Eileen is stunned when she spots her ex-boyfriend Jesse Chadwick on the street. Jesse was last seen back in March 2010, being hounded out of the Rovers by Eileen after he had made a pass at her sister Julie. He's not really prepared to see Eileen after things ended so badly between them, John Thompson explains. When Jesse left he'd been spreading his bets over two sisters, which is slightly morally bankrupt to say the least. He's changed dramatically because he's very remorseful for that behavior, so for him to think that Eileen would even contemplate having him back after he made a play for her sister is not on his radar. As Eileen wonders what on earth Jesse is doing back there, it soon becomes apparent as arch-nemesis Gail approaches, who whilst still surprised, is far more happy to see Jesse. It transpires that Gail had a chance meeting with Jesse whilst on her own trip to Thailand a few years back. The two hit it off and have remained in contact ever since. He's heard about Bethany and he's very worried, John tells us. So on his travels he's returned via Weatherfield to check on Gail, because they've stayed in touch via email. He's very concerned for her. Eileen is utterly baffled by the development, as Gail ushers Jesse's into number 8. Gail's family are equally as bemused with Jesse's arrival, with David and Sarah particularly wary. Shona and Nick are prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt, John continues. Whereas David and Sarah are absolutely not, it's just total mistrust from the start. There is the thinking that they need a decent man in their lives, but as soon as David lists all Gail's previous men, it's no wonder that there is a mistrust, because Gail's sense of judgment over men has been very poor. Whilst he may have been away from the cobbles, it's clear that Gail has kept Jesse abreast of everything that's happened over the past couple of years, when he introduces himself to Adam having recognized him from Sarah's wedding photos. When Jesse comes into the cafe, Shona tries to convince David and Sarah to sit down and talk things through with Jesse, but will they be willing to give him the time of day? Jesse's going to have to work really hard to get David and Sarah on his side, and see he is just a friend who cares about Gail because there's a real sense of mistrust about his motives, John adds. Jesse later meets up with old buddy Steve in the Rovers for a catch-up, and reveals why he has really returned to Weatherfield. 15 years is a long time in Soapland, so what has the former children's entertainer been up to in that time? He did remarry, but that didn't work out, John reveals. He was also badly let down by a friend, which culminated in him being left in some dire circumstances. So as a means to reinvent himself, he started to travel the world to, as they say, find himself. He always had a bit of a cowboy, country and western type look. His name is Jesse James Chadwick, but he's smartened himself up a bit now. He's still got a great sense of humor though, and there's some nice comedy to be played. At the factory, it's the day of Carla's court appearance, after knocking one of the youths who attacked Roy off his bike with the door of her car. It comes only a day after Carla was thrown to receive a letter beginning her divorce proceedings from Peter. If the day wasn't stressful enough for Carla, employee Betsy manages to let slip to a very important client that the absent owner is in court facing ABH charges, with Sally adding that Sarah is also away in Turkey. At the courthouse, Carla comes face to face with Tom, the dad of the boy she knocked over. The two end up in a rather heated exchange, with Ryan forced to step in before Carla makes things even worse for herself. She's been pushed to the edge, and she's had to justify herself in the courtroom, Allison King explains. Outside, she's still making digs about the lad to Ryan when the dad appears and says, "That's my son." She snaps back, making out he deserved it, especially with a dad like him, which probably isn't a great move. She's in a really vulnerable state on that day, she said this letter. There's a lot going on in her head and she just snaps. She's trying to defend herself, although really she's got no defense whatsoever for what she did. Carla heads back to the factory and is soon taking her bad mood out on Betsy and the rest of the employees, ordering them all to go home. However, little does Carla realize that Tom has followed her from the courthouse, and after watching her oversee a delivery, he enters the factory and corners alone Carla. Suddenly this lunatic appears, coming at her and really raising his voice in quite threatening behavior, Allison continues. So she just goes into fight or flight and tries to flee. Luckily, Lisa happens to call in and is able to take control of the situation, but it leaves Carla even more shaken. She goes home and she starts drinking, Ali tells us. She goes into a kind of morose, maudlin mode. It's just the end of a really, really bad day, and tough as she's feeling very sorry for herself. Carla is grateful when Lisa pops by to check on her, but as their friendship continues to blossom, there's an unexpectedly tender moment between the pair, which catches Carla off guard. "I think Carla's still in shock and she's very much in the moment," observes Ali. There is a real friendship growing between them, and the fact that she's come around to check on her really means something to Carla. "I think because she's taken Betsy on, there's kind of kindred spirit forming. We've seen Lisa have a bad day and Carla being a shoulder to lean on. It's been a long time since Carla has had a female friend, somebody who's actually leaning on her but is also a powerhouse in her own right. Now Lisa is there for her, she's leaning on Lisa for the first time, and it's becoming quite a confusing friendship. Lisa keeps appearing, she's always there because of that link through Betsy, and there's a bond growing between them that Carla can't quite define." On Wednesday, Carla is in a much better mood and happily reinstates Betsy's job at the factory whilst buying her a coffee. Though with some confusion over her moment with Lisa, Carla asks to have a talk with her. "I think every step of this friendship is taking her by surprise," Ali admits. The closeness between them for Carla comes from concern, yet at times she can't really put her finger on what this is. 4. Has Hope struck again? Inside number 9, Hope's ongoing suspension for vaping at school hasn't quelled her habit, despite another telling off from Fizz and Tyrone after they found a further vape pen hidden in her pencil case. Fizz and Tyrone are facing other issues at the moment after finding out that Fizz is pregnant. Following a heart-to-heart, the two decided that they were not in a position to go ahead with the pregnancy, but then faced having to break the news to Hope and Ruby after Tyrone accidentally let slip about the baby. Next week, Hope is defying her parents by continuing to vape, threatening Ruby into not telling on her. Cassie can see the tension between the pair and asks them to pull together for the sake of their mom, given the tough time she is going through. On Friday, The Dobbs are paid a visit by Weatherfield High head Mrs. Crawshaw to have a chat about Hope's suspension. Hope is able to convince them all that she has stopped vaping, and Mrs. Crawshaw confirms that she would be happy to have Hope back at school the following day. Much to Hope's dissatisfaction. When she thinks the coast is clear, Hope retrieves a vape she had hidden in the sideboard in the living room, but when Evelyn asks her to come and help in the shop, she quickly throws the vape back in. As they leave the house, they fail to see the wisp of smoke escaping from the sideboard. With Ruby due home any moment, will disaster be averted, or has Hope managed to start another fire? Elsewhere, there's a new enemy on the street with the arrival of Mason's older brother Logan. Mason has already made known to Stu the issues he has with his brothers, who aren't averse to giving him a beating when he doesn't toe their line. Stu has taken Mason under his wing since his release from the Young Offenders Institute, with he and Yasmin having employed him at speed dial and given him a roof over his head. Eileen is less than impressed by the ongoing support the pair have shown for Mason, and makes known her disapproval when she sees them in the cafe together. ITV When Eileen later talks with Yasmin, she questions whether having Mason around is something Yasmin is truly comfortable with. Eileen urges her not to let Stu bully her into it, leaving Yasmin with food for thought. Meanwhile, when Stu trips over Mason's bag in the restaurant, Mason is quick to grab it back. What is he hiding? As Mason points him out, Stu heads over to confront Logan, who hastily speeds off. When a brick is later thrown through the window of number 6, there's little doubt as to who is responsible. Stu later admits to Yasmin that Logan was attempting to force Mason into taking part in an armed robbery, and it seems that this is his punishment for refusing. With Yasmin's home now being targeted, how will she react? Also next week, as the investigation into Joel's disappearance continues, Kit finds some shocking evidence and makes an urgent call to Lisa. As a preview clip for the week's episode show, Kit has found records of text messages on Joel's laptop, showing threats he made towards Lisa's daughter Betsy. Lisa reels as she reads the horrific messages, where Joel goes as far as threatening to kill Betsy. "My mom is in the police," Betsy has replied to one particular message. "She can't help you if you're dead," Joel coldly replied. The moment is interrupted when D.I. Costello asks to talk to Lisa privately, having been made aware of the messages by Kit. What will this mean for Lisa's work on the case?